Hi, welcome back to Living the Questions podcast. Today, I'm wanting to kind of dance my way into my question, which is not different from any other week. But this week, it feels like I need to warm myself into that space, specifically because I'm coming off of a week where I pushed myself really hard. And this is definitely not the first time where I've done that. And yet it felt very different this time. I felt really, really, really run down. And I could tell the difference in my body of what run down really felt like and what I needed to do, which was a very hard reset of just shutting it down for a second. And this rundown came from a space of feeling, feeling like I, that I pushed myself too hard. But what was interesting was that I've done this before and not felt run down. And my body, or maybe the relationship I have to my body now, or it just happened to be this way. But I think it's more to do with the relationship I have with my body now that I'm understanding the communication that I'm learning its language. Um, but I think my body is communicating quicker these days than maybe it has in the past. Or maybe I was really good at ignoring it because I hadn't totally learned its language, or because I just chose to ignore it. Um, but this time felt different because I was in a week that was extremely busy, and a couple things happened that made it more busy than it typically would be. And I did what I always do, and I made it all work, and I got everything done, and I prioritized what needed to be prioritized, and I pushed off what could be pushed off. And I was able to do things for the people that I work for. I was able to do things for people in my life. I was able to do things for me, like get the podcast out last week. And I got to the end of the week and I looked at all of that, and I still had things to do and places that I committed to being. And I sat there and I was so tired, and I usually would feel really good about the fact that I did it all and now I can just rest. And instead, I just felt I didn't feel proud. I don't know what I felt exactly, but when I was describing it to a friend, that was the first thing that came up. I was like, oh, yeah, I didn't feel proud. And that was an interesting choice of words, but it was the reality of things. I think I felt proud before. I think I never realized just how rewarded we are in, in society, sort of as, to overwork ourselves, to fit it all in, to do all the things, to get it all done, and hustle to do so, and how rewarded that's been, and how much that has become a part of my learned survival instructions. And last week, that did not feel at all like what felt good anymore. Um, and I would say that I've already known cognitively that I don't align with that anymore. And yet we still live these things out, and yet we're still actively undoing patterns and actively having to make different choices to change that in real time. And when, like unexpected fires come up with different things, in your day to day and your job and in anything in your life, um, you know, all of a sudden you're acting out of a mode of like urgency. And then what do you do with that in that moment? And what I've noticed for me that I really want to live into a question of, because I really want to change it, is that my go-to mode is like having to put out the fires, is having to come from this space of urgency. And what I notice more than anything else is that the things, like what is feeling uncomfortable or what is feeling, um yeah, whatever is feeling like it's calling for urgency, whether it's actually urgent or not, whether and maybe just feels, I'm saying the word uncomfortable, but actually it's more like, um yeah, like in the example of last week, it was that there was this thing that happened for one of my clients, and I um, felt like that needed to happen immediately. In some ways, there were things that were timely that needed to get done, and also I think the energy of that was for me. Um, I was picturing how, what would happen if these things didn't get done, and it was the thought process of it disrupting this launch that's happening, and then that effect would be that it would upset the person that I work for, and I definitely didn't want that, and I didn't want, them to be stressed, and I didn't want any of that. So then even just the thought of that brought this like tension in me, and then I was like, "Ooh, we got to fix that immediately." If I really break it down, that's what was happening overall. But in the moment, it was, this needs to get done in order for these other people to work on this thing. I got to do this in this time and all this stuff. And that's one piece of a lot of things that happened last week. But we have that. And then when I think about other things that feel like I got to put a fire out, it's who is most upset and how do I quell that? And I feel like those are the moments. It feels like that's the trigger point. It's like, oh, if somebody's upset, I don't want that to happen. So I have to focus on that, and everything else gets pushed back. And the thing that I don't love about that is that I then end up focusing on and prioritizing that, and the things that end up getting pushed down, or the things that end up getting um, the least of my energy, um, are those closest to me, are those with the most understanding. And I think that the question I want to live into in this is, how do I not, how do I, hmm, how do I rebalance this so that the people in my life, the places in my life, the jobs in my life, whoever, like whatever it is, how that are bringing that understanding, or that are very close to me, how do I balance this out so that those people, that those places don't end up getting less of me, or the shit end of the stick, if you will, when fires arise, when this urgency feels like it pops up, when I don't recognize that I'm in this survival mode of sorts. And I think what's interesting is I can hear it. I can hear the survival instincts that I have here, which is, there's like I don't want to lose the um yeah, I don't want to lose this relationship, whatever this meaningful relationship is. So in this example, it's work. Um, but if someone's upset in my life, I don't want the person I care about to be upset. So I'm going to focus on that and I'm going to make sure that that rebalances itself so then whew, we can calm, so that my nervous system can be calm, so that that other person can hopefully feel better. And also, what I'm not recognizing is what I just said, which is that I can feel more at ease again and we're good. And that is part of my internal survival instructions, which is something that actually we just dove into in um, the the course that I'm running with my dear friend Kylie right now, Anchored Abundance, and we just were talking about what are your survival instructions, what are these set of rules that you've inherited, that you've learned over the course of life, that are creating an invisible barrier and limit and keeping you on this old map with these protectors really loyal to going down those old routes, even when the terrain is changing. And can we notice that the terrain is changing? And can we release having to follow this map in many ways? Can we expand our perspective? And that's very difficult to live out, to shift and change, to even see that we're following this old map. And what is that? What are those rules? What is that map that's being laid out? What are our survival instructions? And so mine are definitely a multitude of things, but one of those things for sure is having to pay attention to when tension arises, when someone I care about is upset, when someone important to me is upset. That's where the focus goes. I got to make that better, and then then we're safe. Then we are safe. That's one small but very large part of my survival instructions of how to stay safe. And that has definitely, that map of mine, I still have a big chunk of it that I unconsciously many times find myself following. And yet there is a large part of it that has expanded into this new terrain around it that I'm much more open to these days. And still, that old part of the map that still exists contains this piece where, yeah, where I will shift focus there. My energy goes there. And then the cause and effect of it is that the people closest to me or the people that are most understanding in my life end up um end up being affected. And I have not realized that, like, how much that has an effect in my life, because I was focused on the survival. I was focused on, okay, this is what matters here. And there is a consequence to that I wasn't seeing. And I remember when I was was dating a former partner, and I recognized this in how I time managed or didn't time manage at all. And I was trying to make everything work. I was trying to do all the things. I just believed I could fit everything in, and I wanted to make, quote unquote, everybody happy in how I was making all the plans and doing all the things. And I remember in trying to make it all work and trying to, quote, make everyone happy, I didn't see how exhausted I was in that process. That didn't even enter my mind. And when I was bringing a partner into that set of circumstances, I got to see through them the effect that going about life that way, that using that old map, those survival instructions, what that had on another and on myself actually as a mirror. And his feedback to me was, well, and one, it caused friction for us. And I was like, oh, what, like I thought that I had figured this all out, and then this is causing friction for us. But here I was like, okay, well, I can work this out, but like I need to be safe here. And I didn't realize how much that was happening until this conversation I started to realize like that's not what I want either. How do I make all of these things work? And I couldn't. I couldn't make, quote, everyone happy outside of me and my partner happy, and I wasn't even thinking about the effect that it had on me, and his frustration in that was genuinely a mirror of what I wasn't even seeing inside of myself, which was my own exhaustion. My I wasn't able to see what I really wanted to get up to because I was really focused on doing all of the things, and making it all work and having that be possible, but it wasn't really sustainable. And so in that dynamic, I was able to see that mirroring of this, like you know, there were so many different pieces. Like you think that there's so many more hours in the day than there actually are, and that's just not possible. Or you're trying to make things work that just aren't going to work, and you're trying to make it work with um yeah, with not having the resources to do it. And I think that, and and like and more often than not, the resources that I didn't have to do it were time or energy, and I was doing it anyway. And that part is so, I think we miss that those resources are really important. And yeah, I would just keep going. And that's the part that's rewarded in greater society, is like, like they run like a machine. She runs like a machine. She gets it all done. How does she do it? She gets it all done. And I wasn't even looking for it like that, but it is celebrated. So it wasn't flagging in my mind as an issue. It was like, I got it all done and amazing. That's so great. Like I was able to fit it all in and I did it. Whew, now I can breathe easy. Or, you know, I, I don't know. Like there's so many pieces to that. And when I did that on small scale last week, I didn't feel that way. I didn't feel that exhale. I didn't feel that relief. I felt like, man, this is unsustainable. And I'm really happy that my body feels that way now at this point these days. It just felt tired. It felt tired, and it felt like I, what does any of that matter that I got all of that done? That just isn't it just isn't sustainable, and it doesn't feel like how I want to be living my life. And that was really interesting to me because it wasn't even about who it was affecting anymore. It was affecting me. And while that was really helpful to have that mirroring of my partner, I didn't like the feeling of it affecting people in my life. And as I was saying before, I don't like the feeling of things affecting those that are most understanding to me. It makes me feel like I'm taking advantage of that. And that's not at all what I want to be doing. I don't want to have this beautiful, you know, this beautiful well of understanding from people as I am over functioning over here. This feels incorrect to me. And sometimes we have to do what we need to do. Um, and that understanding piece is really supportive. And when are we in this dynamic more often than not? And it's not actually, yeah, it's coming at the expense of something. And I think that that's the tricky part. I think what I'm noticing is that in trying to make it all happen, something is inevitably going to get done poorly or not get done at all or be missed or um, just get deprioritized. And how do we meet that with integrity? And I think that that was something that was hard for me to sit with last week was I needed I needed support in being able to deprioritize certain things. I needed more spaciousness to be able to have space for certain things more than I would typically. Um, and that meant that I needed understanding from other people. That meant that what I didn't realize at the time was that meant that I needed to ask to do certain things and say no to certain things um, and perhaps give myself room instead of instead of just trying to make it all happen. Um, but where was it possible to create room, or where was it possible to um, just be honest about my bandwidth and what I had to give and what I didn't? And it's just interesting to me because even in this moment, I'm so curious what continuing to live into that looks like. I'm so curious what, yeah, I'm so curious what I'm so curious what it all, yeah, will continue to unfold to look like as I live into it with more and more conscious competence. I think that that's what I'm starting to see. And so last week felt like a moment of that. It felt like, oh yeah, this doesn't feel good to do. I'm not proud of having made all of this work. I'm not proud of the list of things that I just did. I'm not proud of having a quote busy week. I'm exhausted and I feel like I have nothing left to give. I'm exhausted and I don't have the resources that I wish I did for those that I wish I had it for in the time that I, you know, would typically have more space for myself and my loved ones. I don't like that feeling at all. And it was interesting because when I was sharing that with, with someone close to me, they were saying, but you practiced, like I was saying over the weekend, I really needed space to recover. I couldn't tell for a minute if I was getting sick or if I was just straight up totally run down. And my body was just deeply, deeply run down. And so someone close to me had reached out and was telling me that they were having a hard time, and I was able to be there over, text message. And I would typically offer to be there in other ways and be able to support in other ways. And I stopped myself from offering it because I could tell that I just didn't have it to offer. And when I shared that with them at a later point and how bummed I was to just not have that ability, and how, you know, hard it was to not send that additional text that just offered that support. Um, they were like, "Oh, but look, you were practicing in real time, you know, not offering what you don't have, not overextending, not trying to do all the things. You were practicing, yeah, being able to really honor that." And so I think it's interesting. It feels uncomfortable and yet it takes time, and it would have been out of integrity for me to offer that. And so I love that I'm getting to see that beautiful practice. And also, where can I recognize that in the moments of urgency when I feel like I have to do, XYZ, and I see it coming at the expense of something else? What do I do in that scenario that rebalances? That if I do have to put out a fire, quote unquote, and focus on something, how do I stand in integrity with what that may affect around me, so that I'm not pushing all of my attention here and somehow disregarding another relationship, somehow disregarding another area of life. I How do we honor our relationships with ourselves, with each other, with our responsibilities, in a way where in a way where we can have compassion and understanding of those survival instincts for for those like urgent moments, and the ability to actually, like choose differently and grow in that, so that we can meet those moments in ways that actually strengthen our relationship to ourselves, to each other, to what we're responsible for. Yeah, I don't know. There's so much there. And as you can maybe tell, I'm very much living into this question and these pieces. And that was only last week. It feels like a million years ago now, because that felt like a lot. And that's also been something I've been living out and into for a really long time. Um, and it was a hard one to face, a hard mirror to face, because when you're trying to make all the things work, I saw that as a positive. I really did. I saw it as a positive. I was like, I'm going to make it all work and be there for everyone and do all the things, and this will be great. And there was a part of me that was excited by that, to, sometimes, for the most part, to be like, oh, we'll get to be here and here and here. And look at all the fun things we'll get to do. Or, you know, this will feel really good because I'll be able to see a bunch of people I love, and, whatever it might be. There's a million different scenarios of how that could play out. But many times it had to do with, yeah, people I loved and wanting to see people I loved. And I don't think I realized how often in that I was, both wanting to do all of the things because I was probably just wanting to, right? Like just wanting to be there for all of my people, or do all the fun things. Um, yeah, and just support people depending on what the things are. And if I admitted even to myself that I didn't have the energy for it, then I would feel, one, selfish, as I'm untangling from things like fawning and people pleasing. And two, I think there was a part of me that had a tape internally saying that I was going to upset someone. By not doing something, I was going to upset someone. And therein lies my survival instructions. Do not upset anyone. If someone is upset, you need to do something about it. You need to make it better. You need to fix that. And I it runs deep. Those survival instructions run deep, and they come up in these tricky places that you would never expect them to come up in. And when I started to see it affect my relationship, because my partner then was coming to all of those things with me, watching me put together life in this way, they were they were ringing the alarm of like, this is unsustainable. I'm tired by this, and I'm, and this is affecting me, and me having to face that mirror, or choosing to face that mirror. I could still avoid it if I wanted to, I guess, but for me, I, I was choosing to face it, and it was deeply uncomfortable. There were many times where I would be mad at my partner for making it difficult for me to not do all of the things. And what they were really trying to do was love me and say, why are you trying to do all of the things? And bring that very loving conversation up of, this is unsustainable. Can we look at this? And what I didn't realize at the time was, was a loving way of saying, like, I see your survival instructions. I see you living this out. Do you have to? Is that necessary anymore? Why are we doing this? Why are you doing this? Honestly. And is there a different way that this could be done? And also, I see you tired. Do you see you tired? And can you make room for you? Can you make room for rest? Can you make room to be honest with yourself about what is possible and what isn't? And as I've said on this podcast before, my favorite line that I've been living by for a bit now, just because it's possible doesn't mean it's sustainable. If you have that space on your calendar, does that mean you always have to fill it all? Is it okay to have space on your calendar? Is it okay to have space in your life? And I think before, my survival instructions would have said no. And now it feels like it's deeply necessary for me to have that. And I still struggle sometimes to create that. And last week, when things were wildly unsustainable and I was living out my survival instructions per usual, the first thing that I was able to really do was make space. And sure, it wasn't easy sometimes to really live into it, but for the most part, it was a lot easier than it used to be, I'll say. And after taking big chunks of space for myself, I felt my energy come back. I felt myself feel better. I felt myself, even when I was tired, my go to, if somebody asked me how I was, uh, you know, um, a few days after actually taking that space, I I was like, I just responded good. I like genuinely felt good. And that was coming from a space of feeling deeply run down. But I had made space for myself, and that actually made all the difference. Yeah. So the question I'm living into with myself is, can I make that space? Can I have compassion when these these parts of me that are living out my survival instructions come up and just run out of habit? Can I catch that in real time? Can I honor what it's bringing up? Can I recognize that it comes from very deeply, like patterns that run deep, patterns that are in my lineage, patterns that are well worn, I've learned over time. Can I be gentle as I'm reworking those, as I'm understanding those differently, as I'm relating to them and myself differently? Can I, yeah, have grace with that? Can I create space around that? Can I not, can I choose to, even now as I share many things about those things, can I choose to not have judgment or shame for those pieces or for how they play out? And can I honor that judgment is a protector within me who is worried to rock the boat even in my own sharing of my survival instincts, my survival instructions. Um, yeah, it's fascinating to see what comes up in the body where it's like, no, 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 you just shared a lot. No, 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 this is how, like, there's a role of like perception management that I feel coming up, and yet I'm sharing it anyway. But to that, to that sweet inner protector, to that sweet part of me that wants to manage perception in this moment, it's okay. In this moment, I hear you and I'm here with you, and um, I'm choosing to not embody that role. It's not necessary. So here's to challenging that. Here's to living into the continuation of challenging things like that, relating differently, like I just did, to that part of me that's a protector, and many other parts of me that are protectors that um, I may not be seeing directly in this moment, but I feel and meet over time. Can I meet them all gently? And can I be open to shifting to a much more sustainable way of living? And what does that bring? What medicine does that bring to myself, my soul, but well beyond me? Well beyond me. If we're all connected, then how I interact with those parts of me and how I learn about those parts and what I do with that has a much greater impact here. Just in the way of when I was saying, like, if I'm focusing all of my attention here, there's an effect here. There's a cause and effect. There's an impact that it has somewhere else. And where's the better balance here? Where can I honor what feels important to me here too, even when my focus may have to be pulled for a second? Can I still honor this? And how do I do that? That's the question I'm living into, and I'm really excited to see what that looks like in practice in my life over time. Continue to live into that, and also what is that in the world? What does that look like in the world? And how does living into that in our world make a greater impact, make a more loving, connected world? Yeah, there's something big there. Whew. Well, thank you for diving down that road with me. I'm very curious. To keep living into this question. And I appreciate you being here as always, and all the ways that we live into every question and curiosity that comes up. Thank you for being here for this one. And and what I feel like is really, truly always a continued conversation. They're all connected, and they lead to a space of letting us expand in life, and letting us contract when we need to, and letting us expand where we could use the perspective widening, which I think is really powerful. So yes, thank you for being here for that. I'm curious what your questions are, what yeah, what this conversation maybe brought alive for you. Feel free to share it. And I look forward to seeing you in the next episode.